There's nothing around you and I that is not alive. There's nothing around you and I that is not active. There's nothing that is not sentient and has its ability to observe, act, and react, just like you and I observe, act, and react. One of the reasons why humans are highly favored is because of our ability to be able to take these things to use. Over several millennia, millions and millions and eons of time, we've been able to observe, study, and correlate the activity, the spirit, and the intent of all these other things around us. Many of us are familiar with the first 7 Hermetic principles, being mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, gender, rhythm, cause and effect. We'll start with the earth element, salt, because everything around you and I has a sentient and active intelligence to them. One of these principles can always be used to assist us, beginning from the most basic level. You will hear people tell you take a spiritual bath, burn a candle, light an incense. Besides the smell good of the incense and the act of engaging in that rite, here's a functional science to it. On a rudimentary level, spiritual baths that most people are informed of is salt. Put some salt in your bath water, soak yourself in it. Whether it be table salt, Epsom salt, Himalayan salt, sea salt. People have heard over time that put some salt in water, do something with it regarding your body. But why? How? I'll clarify that for you. And I'll show you the step-by-step importance of it. And we'll make sense of it. We'll remove it from the realm of speculation. We'll remove it from the realm of someone just said and someone following it based on full faith. You will know why. And the more you know why, the more the law of mentalism to be able to apply all these other things regarding that specific spiritual rite that you're doing, the more it would be able to be put into effect. Since everything around you and I has a sentient and active intelligence to it, there's always a use for it. And whatever usually you would use, for instance, people use salt in cooking. The only reason why salt acts as an amplifier of flavor is because it's doing something to those other particles that you are adding it to. If it can do the same thing, since everything we can find out of you and I also exists within us, within our immediate environment or far out there in the cosmos. What that basically means is these activities and similitude, the corresponding aspect of it, of how we use it, with other inanimate things, can actually be merged with us. In other words, the molecular particle and the chemical structure, once you mix it with your molecular particle and structure, something occurs. Salt has played a role in alchemy as the physical body, meaning earth. And when you look at a table of correspondence of plants, crystals, and things like that, salt is always corresponding to earth, which remains after combustion, then after chemical reaction. It acts as a residue of something. It's an after effect of creation of something. Just like the body, the physical reality is also an after effect of creation of something that cannot be observed with the 5 senses. The corporeal substance that survives death to reinaugurate new life. It was both corruption and preservation against corruption. In much more simpler terms, both the last agent of corruption and the first agent of generation. As such, the alchemical salt functions as the fulcrum of death and revivification. The idea that the agent, instrument, and patient of the alchemical process are not separate entities, but aspects of one reality, prefigures the significance accorded to the study of the hermetic problem of salts. Just as in chemistry, the salt may be defined as a product of an acid and a base, alchemically, which is the same thing as chemistry. Salt is the integral solution to the primordial polarities, principle of polarity, embodied in the mineral symbolic of cinnabar. Cinnabar is what they call the philosopher's stone. And this is what it looks like. In case you're wondering what the philosopher's stone when it comes to the physical crystallized aspect, it is this right here. In a bodily function, it's the glands in the brain. But nonetheless, on the outer aspect, the philosopher's stone is cinnabar, because cinnabar also has some chemical structure that is also found directly in the sap, or the oil that's released in the pineal gland, and the hypothalamus gland, and the thalamus gland. The salt of sulfur and mercury, then the combination of these two particles equates to this. In the alchemy, salt forms an equilibrium, then it's used to balance things out, an earth element, between an active function and a passive resistance, aspects which are latently present in the primordial unity, but crystallize into physical existence as salt. What they're telling you here is this thing called salt has something about it that is primordial in nature and is heavily abundant around us, and is used to balance things where chaos exists one way or the other. So when you dip yourself into that sea salt, Himalayan salt, table salt, or Epsom salt, whatever, you are using the chemical structure of that thing that balances things. You are utilizing it to balance you out. Let's make more sense of it beyond all this sophisticated words. Let's bring it to a more common sense level. So what is salt? Sodium chloride, commonly known as salt, although sea salt also contains other chemical salt. Salt is an ionic compound, the chemical formula NaCl, representing 1:1 ratio of sodium and chloride ion. Stop right there. This word ion is extremely important. What is an ion? An ion is an atom. Remember, you and I are made of something that you cannot physically touch, but act as the building block of this reality on a physical level. And it is highly mutable. This ion, this atom, highly mutable, based on one thing and one thing only: thoughts. Predefined as law of mentalism, which all these other correspondence. By the way, there's about 12 hermetic principles. Only 7 is introduced to the general public. But the law of mentalism is what gives birth as a mother of the rest, whether it's publicly available, which is this, or not. Remember, salt is made of ions, meaning the atomic structure of sodium and chloride. And ions are atoms or group of atoms having a positive or negative electrical charge. Meaning, in order for atoms to do what they do, something has to keep them going, which is electricity. And then atoms are nothing but battery. Literally, atoms are batteries. But that battery, just like any given physical battery that will have a positive and negative side, aka the cation and the anion, like you look at a battery and you see the plus and negative, same foundational principle. That's exactly what atoms are in the human body. But just like that physical battery, That physical battery, you can put it into any device and it can fail to work because there's no charge, as it says here. An atom or group of atoms having a positive or negative electrical charge. So that battery itself requires charge to function. And so does the atom in the human body. Remember, we just read that salt is a primordial element that acts as an equilibrium factor in whatever you add it or use it to. What you do when you use salt, when you take salt bath, or when you create a salt circle, or when you use salt to clean things, to negate any type of, quote, negative thought forms, or when you use it to clean certain areas, what you're doing is you are charging that thing, that area, your body, your own essence, which all this is affected. The vibration changes when you take salt baths. The things that you polarize yourself based on your electric output changes. The foundational principle of gender, meaning the masculine aspect of your thoughts, and the feminine aspect, which is the one that receive, that can be impressed upon, which is the feminine, which is the subconscious, the masculine being the conscious that thrusts information out, that can express. Conscious mind expresses, the subconscious or preconscious is impressed upon. That is why people do affirmations. What you're doing when you're doing affirmation is you are using your conscious mind to express certain intent in reality so that it can be impressed. Like you would use an embosser to impress something. Well, you use that embosser as your conscious mind, and your subconscious mind is that paper. Your rhythm, it changes your flow in your mind and your body. And by virtue of that, since your mind is changing, the mind is always the cause. The effect is the outer reality. So when people take salt baths, unbeknownst to them, they are merging the chemical composition based on the structures of the ions of that salt, the charge of it, the equalized 1-to-1 ratio of sodium and chloride ions with their physical body. And it's changing their rhythm, it's changing their polarity, the law of mentalism, the cause and effect of vibration and correspondence that they are attracting and creating. Take it one step further, light an incense that corresponds with that specific intent. Burn a specific candle of a certain color that corresponds with a certain intent. And the thing with candle is, whenever you use it, always write your name on it, your name and your date of birth. Because if you, say for instance, if you don't live out in the woods or something, and you're around a neighborhood, or you live in a house with someone, if you're not careful, that other man or woman can take the good fortune from that spiritual work you're doing, or negate it because of their polarity, because of their vibration, because of their correspondence, because of their mentalism. But nonetheless, whenever people take salt bath, this is just rudimentary stuff. What they're doing is they are concentrating the ionic structure, the electrical charge of that salt. They're using it to charge themselves up. You know, when you begin to look deep into certain cultures, some deities, for instance, the West African ones, people know of Ogun, Shango, Ifa, Oya, Batala, all those, or the corresponding Greek aspect like the Zeus, Thor, Artemis, all that. Do you know, no matter what angle you look at it from, even from religious, Gabriel, Michael being Aries, Gabriel being Gemini, Uriel, Raphael, Israel, all those, guardian angel or spirits spoken of in the Bible, angel of God, all those angels, deities, ancestral entities, and their similitude actually directly corresponds to certain chemicals, just as much as they directly corresponds to certain planets. None of it is isolated. What happens when you put salts into water is the question you ought to ask now. Since everything has an ionic charge of its own, meaning an electrical charge, and the human body has an electrical charge also. Whenever your muscle twitch, whenever your muscle contract, the only thing that's causing it to happen is because of electricity. Without flow of electricity, your body will not be able to move. Just like a battery who is dead, that has too much acid in it, bloats up, like a car battery or AAA or AA battery, how it kind of gets big and fat. That's exactly what happens to the human body when there ceases to be electrical flow. When you observe a dead body, it bloats up. Same exact thing that happens with a battery when it's dead. No difference. It's a universal foundational principle that everybody sees but don't correlate. In other words, in order for you to change your vibration, rhythm, cause and effect, mentalism, polarity, gender, you have to change the electrical flow. You have to somehow manipulate the ionic structures on a positive, aka cation, negative, anion aspect of it. Some people look physically fine. Some people look physically beautiful. Spiritually, they have no electrical charge. Those people are usually very vulnerable to spiritual attacks. Sometimes you wonder why good people with good intent and a good heart, beautiful woman, a handsome man doing this and doing that, yet they just so always happen to run into misfortune. It's because their spiritual charge is weak. So you can have an athlete, a strong man who works out real good, but that man is spiritually feeble. He can punch you in the face and knock you out, break your jaw, twist your neck, and make you disabled just by one punch with that huge fist. But touch that man spiritually, and you see that he's no different than an ant that you can squish with your toenail. In other words, you can be physically charged, but spiritually deficient. And what use is it if you are spiritually deficient? If the spirit is what the physical is predicated upon. If this physical world is merely a lag behind aspect of something that's incorporeal in the spiritual realm, and the quickest way we can access that is understanding how chemicals, magnetism, the foundational principles of the mind work. Why then do people merely rely just on what they observe with the five senses? Just like someone could work out every day and build a muscle, or someone could go out there and run 5 miles every day and get better times, or get faster, or do one thing or the other faster, better. You can do the same thing with your spirit. It's a muscle that you must build. And one of the ways you build it is by using the natural elements to consecrate yourself with it and align very, very, very specific thoughts with it. Just as there's physical charges on the physical body, there's charge on the spiritual level. And you can take physical object and use it to consecrate on a spiritual level also. This is not spooky stuff. This is not some far-fetched spiritual feel-good, talk-good conversation. This is functional aspect of spirituality, which is nothing but science. Spirituality, science, one and the same. No different. The moment anyone tries to separate spirituality and science, know that they are lying to you and that there's an agenda to divide your mind and stop you from using your brain to its proper capacity. They're trying to kill your brain and your mind electromagnetically. Run away from that, because spirituality and science are one and the same. So what exactly happens when you put salt in water? We've read that salt has electrical charge just as much as everything does, because that's the building blocks of everything. So what exactly occurs when you put salt in water? Here it is. See these building blocks? It's very mutable. Just as much as sound can affect the flow of water, thoughts can also affect the flow of water. Conductivity, salinity, and total dissolved solids. What is conductivity? Conductivity is a measure of water's capability to pass electrical flow. The only reason why water can be used to create electricity, whereby just have running water and apply the momentum somehow, and it creates a magnetic field. That magnetic field goes directly with electricity. Where there's magnetic field, there's electricity. Where there's electricity, there's magnetic field. Magnetic field is like the aura that electricity creates. Electricity is a charge of life force. And when that charge of life force exists, it has its own aura called magnetism, or like a magnetic field. This right here. This thing called magnetic field, the cute word in modern day that people use for it is called aura, or quote, your energy. The stronger your electric output is, the stronger your magnetic field is. And all electricity has to have something to conduct them. Electricity exists everywhere at every time. It just needs something in a medium to be able to conduct it. And that medium are the atoms in your body. Conductivity is a measure of water's capability to pass electrical flow. You and I have water in our body. Our body is a perfect machine. So much so that outer technology is used to mimic ours. This ability is directly related to the concentration of ions in the water. So waters also have electrical charge of their own, just as much as salt does, just as much as you do. You see how you're concentrating yourself with certain things based on similitude? These conductivity ions come from dissolved salts and inorganic materials such as alkalis, chlorides, sulfides, and carbonate compounds. Compounds that dissolve into ions are also known as electrolytes, as in electricity, meaning anything that is soluble inside water has the ability to electrically charge that water. And you as a human being has this thing called a mind to be able to control reality. When it all comes down to it, this thing called cause and effect, the cause is the mind, the effect is the reality of that mind. An advantage humans have over animals. The reason why it would tell you in religious books that we are the Lord of the land over any other beings and any other animal is because we are able to creatively think and focus specific thought and create the reality. Meaning you are taking something in a substance and an incorporeal level and you are merging it with the chemical structure of these things that are easily mutable based on their conductivity of electricity. The more ions that are present, the higher the conductivity of water. It's simple. Ions are atoms with electrical charge. The more of it is present, the higher the water is able to be charged. So now when you put salt in water, you are charging it and you are soaking yourself in it to change these foundational principles of your reality. Likewise, the fewer ions that are in the water, the less conductive it is. Distilled or deionized water can act as insulator due to its very low, if not negligible, conductivity value. Ions conduct electricity due to their positive and negative ions. When electrolytes dissolve in water, they split into positively charged cation and negative charged anion particles. As the dissolved substance splits in water, the concentration of each positive and negative charge remain equal. Remember, we just read about salt and it having an equilibrium aspect. This means that even though the conductivity of water increases with added ions, it remains electrically neutral. It's neutral in the sense that it's now waiting for you to instruct it once you dip yourself into that water. The only way you can instruct the chemical structure and electricity that's charging that water is based on your thoughts, whether you want to use it for good or bad. The full 45 minutes video is on the Patreon page. Take care and best of luck.